Over 60, and getting tingling in your hands or feet. 7 foods rich in the nutrients nerves need. This is the nutrient gap doctors rarely explain to patients over 60 who show up describing tingling in their hands or feet. Millions of people in this stage of life notice the same thing. A tingling, prickling, sometimes burning sensation that seems to come from nowhere, with no injury and no clear trigger. It can show up while gardening, while buttoning a shirt, while simply sitting still watching television. Doctors have a name for it: peripheral neuropathy. But behind that clinical term is something far more fixable than most people realize. In a large number of cases, this isn't a mystery illness, and it isn't simply old age in the vague way we tend to write these things off. It's a nerve that isn't getting what it needs to function, and that is a problem with an identifiable, addressable cause. Your nerves are not just wires. They're living tissue wrapped in a fatty insulating layer called myelin, and they depend on a steady supply of specific vitamins and minerals to keep transmitting signals cleanly. When that supply runs low, which becomes far more common after 60, the signal starts to misfire. That misfire is what you feel as tingling, numbness, or that strange electric buzz. Why does this become so much more common as we age? A few reasons stack on top of each other, and most people never hear any of them explained in one place. Stomach acid production naturally declines with age, and stomach acid is required to release vitamin B12 from food so your body can absorb it. So even people eating enough B12 on paper may not be absorbing it properly at all. This is the nutrient gap. It's not always about what's on the plate, it's about what actually makes it into the bloodstream. Many common medications prescribed to people over 60, including metformin for blood sugar and long-term acid reflux medications like proton pump inhibitors, are well documented in medical research to deplete B12 further, sometimes significantly, over months and years of steady use. Kidney function changes can affect how the body handles magnesium, allowing more of it to be lost through urine than in younger years. Alcohol use, even at modest levels, interferes with the absorption of thiamine and B12 both. And simply put, appetites often shrink with age, meals get smaller and more repetitive, cooking for 1 or 2 people replaces cooking for a full family, and the wide variety of nutrients nerves depend on quietly falls out of the diet without anyone noticing, meal by meal, year by year. This is why 2 people can eat what looks, on the surface, like a perfectly reasonable diet, and one of them ends up with tingling hands and the other doesn't. It usually isn't about willpower or even awareness. It's about this specific, quiet, cumulative gap between what nerves need and what's actually being absorbed. The good news is that nerve tissue has a real capacity to recover when it's given what it needs, especially when a deficiency is caught before the damage becomes severe. That's why food, real, specific, targeted food, matters so much here. Not as a replacement for a doctor's evaluation, but as a foundation. If tingling, numbness, or burning has been persistent, please talk to a physician because neuropathy can have several underlying causes and blood work can identify exactly what's low. But for most people, these 7 foods represent the core nutritional building blocks that nerve tissue is quite literally built from and run on. Let's go through them one at a time. Number 1. Wild-caught salmon. Salmon earns its place at the top of this list for 2 separate reasons. First, it's one of the richest natural sources of vitamin B12, the single nutrient most directly tied to nerve health. B12 is essential for producing myelin, that protective sheath around each nerve fiber that allows electrical signals to travel quickly and cleanly, the same way insulation on a wire keeps a signal from leaking or short-circuiting along its length. When B12 runs low, myelin production slows down, and nerve signals in the hands and feet, often the longest nerve pathways in the body, some running nearly the full length of a leg, are usually the first to show the effects, simply because a signal has the farthest distance to travel before it reaches its destination. Second, salmon is loaded with omega-3 fatty acids, particularly EPA and DHA, which have been studied for their ability to reduce nerve inflammation and support the structural fat that nerve membranes are quite literally built from. Chronic low-grade inflammation is now understood to play a role in many cases of nerve dysfunction, and omega-3s are one of the most consistently researched dietary tools for calming that inflammation down. 2 to 3 servings of fatty fish like salmon a week is a target worth aiming for. If fresh salmon isn't accessible, canned wild salmon carries nearly the same nutritional profile at a fraction of the cost, and frozen fillets hold their omega-3 content well too. Number 2. Eggs. Eggs are one of the most complete, affordable sources of nerve-supporting nutrition available, and they deserve more credit than they typically get. A single egg contains meaningful amounts of B12, along with B6 and choline, a nutrient your body uses to build the protective membrane around nerve cells. Choline is often overlooked in these conversations, but it plays a direct role in producing acetylcholine, a chemical messenger nerves use to communicate with muscles, which is part of why B vitamin and choline deficiencies are so often linked to that pins and needles sensation, and also to muscle weakness that can accompany it. The yolk is where nearly all of this nutrition lives, so there's little benefit to the egg white-only approach some people default to out of old, outdated cholesterol concerns that more recent research has largely walked back for most people. Eggs are also easy to eat daily without much preparation, which matters enormously when we're talking about consistent long-term nutrient intake rather than a one-time fix. A habit that takes 5 minutes each morning will always outperform a perfect meal eaten once a month. Number 3. Spinach and other dark leafy greens. Spinach brings 2 nerve-critical nutrients to the table at once: folate and magnesium. Folate works alongside B12 in the same biochemical pathway that produces myelin and supports healthy nerve cell division. The 2 nutrients are so linked that a deficiency in one can actually mask or worsen a deficiency in the other, which is one reason doctors usually test for both together rather than in isolation. Magnesium, meanwhile, plays a completely different but equally important role. It regulates how nerve cells fire. Nerves use tiny electrical impulses to send signals, and magnesium controls the flow of calcium and potassium across the nerve cell membrane that makes those impulses possible in the first place. Low magnesium has been directly associated with increased nerve excitability, which can show up as that buzzing, restless, tingling feeling, especially at night when the body is at rest and those misfires become more noticeable against the quiet. Cooking spinach also concentrates it. A full bag of raw spinach wilts down to a fraction of its volume, so a cup of the cooked version delivers far more nutrition than the same cup eaten raw. A cup of cooked spinach, kale, or Swiss chard a few times a week is a simple way to work both nutrients into your routine. Number 4. Pumpkin seeds. Pumpkin seeds are one of the most concentrated food sources of magnesium available, ounce for ounce beating out most other common snacks by a wide margin, including nuts that get far more attention for their mineral content. A small handful provides a substantial portion of the daily magnesium many adults over 60 are falling short on, which matters given how widespread low magnesium intake actually is in this age group, according to national nutrition surveys. Alongside magnesium, pumpkin seeds also supply zinc, a mineral your body uses in nerve repair processes and in maintaining the protective barrier around peripheral nerves. Zinc deficiency has specifically been studied in connection with slower nerve conduction speeds, essentially nerve signals traveling more sluggishly than they should, arriving late the way a delayed phone call still gets through, but feels off. A small daily handful, roasted and unsalted to avoid unnecessary sodium, is an easy habit to build into an afternoon routine, whether eaten plain or sprinkled over soup or yogurt. Number 5. Sunflower seeds. Sunflower seeds bring 2 nutrients into the mix that the first 4 foods don't fully cover: vitamin E and thiamine, also known as vitamin B1. Vitamin E is a fat-soluble antioxidant, and nerve membranes, being made largely of fat, are particularly vulnerable to a kind of cellular damage called oxidative stress, the same slow wear and tear process that rusts metal left out in the weather. Vitamin E helps protect those membranes from that damage over time. Thiamine, meanwhile, is essential for how nerve cells generate the energy they need to keep firing correctly. And a thiamine deficiency is one of the most well-documented, classic causes of peripheral neuropathy in medical literature, going back over a century to the discovery of the condition beriberi, which is really just severe thiamine deficiency affecting the nerves and heart. Modern cases are rarely that extreme, But even a mild, unrecognized shortfall can contribute to the same underlying mechanism. A quarter cup of sunflower seeds sprinkled over a salad, yogurt, or bowl of oatmeal covers a meaningful share of both nutrients in one simple, inexpensive addition. Number 6. Avocado. Avocado offers a different kind of support. It's rich in vitamin B6, a nutrient directly involved in producing myelin and in manufacturing neurotransmitters, the chemical signals nerves use to communicate with one another and with the rest of the body. B6 sits in an unusual spot nutritionally. Both too little and, less commonly, too much from high-dose supplementation have been linked to nerve problems, which is exactly why getting it from whole food sources like avocado, rather than megadose supplements bought off a shelf without guidance, is generally considered the safer, more balanced path. Avocado also provides monounsaturated fat, which supports healthy circulation, and good blood flow to the small vessels feeding your hands and feet is its own separate piece of the nerve health puzzle entirely, since nerves depend on that blood supply to receive oxygen and the very nutrients we've been discussing throughout this video. Half an avocado a few times a week, whether mashed on toast or sliced into a salad, is a reasonable and enjoyable target to aim for. Number 7. Lentils and other legumes. Rounding out the list, lentils, chickpeas, and beans bring folate, B6, and plant-based protein together in one inexpensive package that stores well in the pantry for months. They're also one of the better dietary sources of alpha-lipoic acid, a compound that's been studied specifically for nerve health. Some clinical research has looked at higher-dose alpha-lipoic acid supplementation for diabetic neuropathy specifically, and the results there have been promising enough that it's now a fairly well-known supplement in that space, though the amounts naturally present in food are far lower than those studied clinical doses. Still, as part of a broader nutrient-dense pattern eaten consistently, lentils contribute meaningfully to the overall picture rather than acting as a standalone fix. They also happen to be one of the better fiber sources on this entire list, which supports the kind of steady blood sugar control that protects nerve health from an entirely different angle, since sharp blood sugar swings are themselves a well-established contributor to nerve damage over time. A cup of cooked lentils a few times a week, added to soups, stews, or served simply alongside a main dish, is an easy, budget-friendly way to build this into a weekly routine. Put together, these 7 foods cover the full range of nutrients most consistently tied to nerve health: B12 and folate for myelin production, B6 for neurotransmitter and myelin support, magnesium and thiamine for how nerves generate and control their electrical signals, zinc for nerve repair, vitamin E for protecting nerve membranes from damage, omega-3 fats for reducing inflammation, and alpha-lipoic acid as an added layer of support. No single food on this list does everything. That's exactly the point. Nerve health depends on a pattern, not a single miracle ingredient, and that pattern needs to be repeated consistently, week after week, not eaten once and forgotten. If you're noticing tingling, numbness, or that buzzing sensation in your hands or feet, food is a meaningful place to start, but it isn't the whole picture on its own. A simple blood test can check your B12, folate, magnesium, and other key levels, and can rule out or identify other causes like blood sugar issues, thyroid function, or medication side effects that a diet change alone can't fix by itself. Bring this list to that conversation with your doctor, rather than guessing at what to change first. Ask specifically about your B12 and magnesium levels if you're on medications like metformin or long-term acid reducers, since those are 2 of the most common and most overlooked culprits in adults over 60, and they rarely get checked unless someone specifically asks. It's also worth saying plainly, none of these 7 foods work as a single dose or a one-time fix. Nerve tissue that's been running low on these nutrients for months or years doesn't recover overnight, and no amount of salmon eaten in a single sitting will undo that. What actually works is the boring, unglamorous consistency of building these foods into the pattern of an ordinary week, meal after meal, so the nutrient gap simply stops existing. Many people who make these changes and get their levels checked and corrected do notice improvement over weeks and months, though the timeline and outcome varies from person to person depending on how long the deficiency has been present and what's driving it. Your nerves have carried every signal in your body for 6, 7, 8 decades or more. from the first steps you ever took to the hands that have held everyone and everything you've loved. They're not asking for anything exotic in return, just the same steady, simple nutrition they've depended on all along, the kind found in a piece of fish, a handful of seeds, a plate of greens. Sometimes the smallest change on your plate is the one your body has been quietly waiting for.